Welcome to the Tuesday night lecture series at the Thompson Gallery. I'm not sure, but this might be the first live one in a while. Correct? Great. All right, and coincidentally, Raphael Noz is here to present the Fabulation of St. Apophenia. Raphael Noz is an artist and educator living in San Francisco. His work explores memory, the body, as a vessel for time, issues of performance, and how performance is documented. His work spans painting, sculpture, performance, photography, and social interaction. He has documented performances with a Viewmaster. He has documented performances with Viewmaster reels and ex-votos, miracle paintings. His performances as Cortizuma, the Blind King, have been shown at SF Maritime Museum, the San Diego Museum of Art, Berkeley Art Museum, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, as well as many galleries and venues in the Bay Area and beyond. In 2014, Raphael was included in Bay Area Now 7 at YBCA. He has been a guest lecturer at California College of the Arts, San Francisco Art Institute, and Cal State Chico. He has studied art in Florence, Italy, the Museum School in Boston, Rhode Island School of Design, and in Provincetown, Massachusetts. He holds an MFA from CCA and an MS from Wheelock College in Education. So I'll quickly just say a few words about Raph. But I have to take these foggy glasses off. I know Raph as a collaborator, so I think I'll just talk about that quickly. I met Raph through a project that started at CCA called The Something, and he was friends with some of the people in that, and he came in later to that collaboration, and we did a 4-month residency at the Berkeley Art Museum, and we were installed there, and we were really supposed to be doing things there every single day. And that was incredibly taxing and a lot of energy. But Raph was sort of undauntingly professional and full of maximum energy, and did the most amazing performances, and had just an endless well of ideas and positive energy. And I think that enters into his work in a really beautiful way, which I think we'll see here today. And it's just really great to be around, people who doing art with people that's what they're going to always do. They'll never stop. That's their life practice, and that's their work. It's very inspiring, and I think that's the most important thing I want to say about Raph right now. He's an incredibly inspiring person and artist, and I give you Raphael Noz.
This is the Fabulation of St. Apophenia. Fabulation, anybody know what that sort of means or not, or this phrase, or good. It's not supposed to mean anything that you know, and it's supposed to kind of elicit something you think you might know. It's really about telling stories and making up stories sometimes, and believability of stories, and making connections in things that other people may not see connections. So connecting the dots, let's say. I'm apparently the astrologer of the 19th century also. You didn't mention that, Sean, but thank you.
It's a new thing.
Yeah. So I didn't see my name in print very much as a kid, so whenever I see it, I get to be that thing, whatever it is. So mostly it's been good so far. That's pretty cool. All right. I'll get started here. So, I'll just stop here for a second. So fabulation is making things up. You might like the word fable, right? And it's usually in response to a question like, hey, how did that happen? Or how did this get here? Where'd that come from? And then an answer comes, right? Apophenia is finding connections in everything, finding everything connected. Sometimes you get into a state of ecstasy or some other thing that things all start to feel connected, and then you may question that later on. Saint Apophenia is a made-up name, and it was not a Catholic saint, although I was raised very Catholic. And also, Saint Apophenia is the most popular saint in America today. So, believe that or not. Here we go. I want to start with what I used to paint. I was living in Provincetown in Cape Cod for a number of years, and surrounded by a lot of natural beauty, and a lot of people go there to paint that. And so I would paint things like that and things like that. These lovely little houses that are there create these wonderful little sculptures, If you ever played with Monopoly houses, it's kind of like that. But I started to kind of call that visual dictation that I was doing, and that's fine, but there's something more than that. Sort of being, taking dictation of the visual landscape and just kind of putting that down. But I started to realize I needed to do something more than that. So I wanted to start kind of letting the paint have a voice in the process that I was using this paint. So I started making things like that. I was taking a break from this visual dictation, so I wanted. The other thing that happens when you do that is you start to you're confronted with your own mark. So like to see what your mark makes is a really important thing for a person. And I found there was something more than how well I could render something, and that rendering something had a kind of visual tyranny about it. And these paintings started to have a kind of aesthetic tyranny about them. It had to, it was all about what it looked like. It had to look a certain way. It had to look, balanced in a certain way, color choice, whatever. But we don't always look our best or sound our best or whatever. It's more important, I found, to have the thing that's real, right? Because truth is beauty, maybe more than the other way around. So I wanted to see kind of what paint would look like when it wasn't asked to be looking like something else, so metaphor for myself, what would I look like if I'm not being asked to be something else? So, all right, let me move on a little bit, because this is early stuff. You're paying a lot of attention to this, and you'll maybe not see my other things. But so I'm not really representing anything here. This isn't a representation of anything, right? It's not a representation. To me, it's really important to call it non-representational painting, not abstract painting. Because to me, honestly, this is more abstract, because this is a reduction of visual information into a visual narrative that we understand. But non-representational painting is painting that's not trying to pose as anything else. It just is exactly what you see it is, Okay. So I was painting all these little paintings and doing my non-representational painting and doing watercolors and, making these nice paintings. And I like this kind of work because you learn a lot about yourself when you paint. It's like looking in a mirror, a certain kind of mirror. And then I started doing this. And so how did I get there? I got here because of my father's watches, which this is a picture of my father from his name apparently was Caption. And he died when I was living back east, and I came back to California, and all he had left was, all we had of him was a small shoebox of objects. And I was staying at my mother's place at this time, and that shoebox was on the desk. And in it were a couple of watches, like just cheap wristwatches. And every day about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the alarms would go off on the watches. So there was like, imagine like, you're doing your day, and then like your dead father's alarms are going off in a box on the desk, like what's your response to that? So I was trying to figure out what to do with this, and I was like, oh, I'll bury these watches, I'll put them in a thrift store, whatever. And kind of lightning out of the blue, I just had this idea like, no, I'm going to take them to Mexico City and give them to children on the street. So I'd never really been to Mexico before. My father always told me, don't go to Mexico. It's really dangerous. It's different now. He was born in 1917. It's a different world. And so I always had this like, whoa, don't go to Mexico thing. I wasn't really raised very Mexican. Not overtly anyways. Not, his presence was not loud. And he was from Mexico City, so I was very afraid, but I decided I would do that. So I went to Mexico City, and this is a picture of one of the places where I gave one of the watches away to. This little boy is who I gave the watch to, or at least this is the best I can do about showing you what that might have looked like. It was at this location where I gave this watch. This is the space at the where the Virgin Guadalupe is, which was before Catholicism entered Mexico. It was a native site, and it's still like that now. So if you stood right, if I could pull this over here, you'd see the big cathedral over here. That's the old one, and these are some dancers there more recently. So that's where I gave one of the watches, and I also found where my father lived. Or had lived, and I just found it because I happened to be on this bus, and it was it was getting dark, and I looked over and I saw the street, and I got off and I walked around and I found where my father had lived. And like, you may or may not be wondering like, why am I painting like this at all? Well, these are called ex-votos, ex-voto, voto meaning devotion. It means out of devotion. In Mexico, there's a long tradition of painting narrative miracle paintings. So they're usually small, they're on metal, and they're often put in shrine sites. So if you go to certain parts all over the country, you'll find churches with certain churches with just hundreds and hundreds of small narrative paintings that people have painted. And it's just, whoever happened to have something traumatic almost happen to them. And so I when I came back to California after having these interesting experiences, I couldn't put that into a landscape painting. I couldn't make a Cape Cod landscape out of that. So I decided, like, what would it be like if I were able to strip my ego away to show you something really crappy, not copying something and show you how good I can paint, but show you what I can and can't remember as best I can. I don't remember certain things, and certain things I do. And that also tells me, too, it instructs me about where my memory is, what's the key parts. So I found where my father had lived, and he appeared to me in a church, and told me to go to communion, so I did. And once again, these are, traditionally they're painted on scrap metal, but there's a long tradition. They were also really highly professional painters as well later on, or earlier on. He came to me in a dream eventually, months and months later after he died, and this was like, some people have these dreams where a dead dead person comes back to them, and then they're put at peace. And that was this dream for me. I dreamed that I was standing next to, like outside of our apartment, and we had this really awfully cluttered apartment, and it was night, and I was standing there, and I was scared to go inside this apartment because I knew my dead father was in there. This is in my dream, right? And I'm just standing there crying at the doorway, and then he just came out of the side, and he looked great. And he took me and showed me him like a little scene of him as a boy sitting in front of under a Christmas tree with all these presents, and I knew everything was fine. So that's how could I paint a landscape with those kind of stories happening in my head, you know? So, okay. This is another story picture. I'm just going to move through some of these kind of quickly. This is what happened when the night my grandmother passed away. And involves a ball of light that my mother witnessed. My mother being one of the soberest persons you'd ever met, so in case there's any questions of credulity. Our house was taken through eminent domain. Eminent domain. Problem with eminent domain is it's usually imminent. Yeah. I had to walk with her over to the trailer in downtown Los Angeles where she had a sign over the title. And so spiders are crawling all over that guy. And this is me, and that's her. And so I started telling all these stories, you know. They spelled my name wrong on my birthday cake. I never cared about that, but suddenly the PH was really important instead of the F, you know. So I wanted to try and tell those stories, like those moments, you know, those moments of like importance and meaning, right? Not just like what I see out in the world, but like what do I, you know, what meaning do I make from things? So I was doing all these, and that's cool. And then I started doing that. That's not really an ex-voto. So how did I get here? Well, I got here because of the crowns. Because of the crowns. Aside from making the ex-votos, I was also cutting metal, and I'll show you some of those images in a minute, because I realized like when you cut metal, it's like cutting paper. You know, you end up with these great shapes, and like we're so locked into this, you know, machined paper, right? Paper doesn't exist, it's a machine, except that we create it that way. You can cut it into shapes. Metal you can cut into shapes. This is all sheet metal, thin. I started experimenting with making other objects as well. I'll get back to the crowns in a second, but the ex-votos kind of led me to, well, I'll talk about these in a sec, but they led me to cutting up metal like this, and I started experimenting with like colonial ceramics. I don't know if you're aware of this. There were English ceramic manufacturers brought into Mexico, like in the 1700s, to make fine ceramics for the colonial market, and I was fascinated by that. And there was also a Wedgwood catalog from 1776 with engravings made by William Blake, the philosopher artist, and so the arrangements and some of the objects like came from his work, and they look like fleets to me now, like fleets of starships or something, which is kind of fitting for Blake. I did something now, and oops, what am I trying to do? I think I got locked out of my own slideshow. Oh, here we go. So I was making these, and these objects kind of brought me to think about this confluence of colonial and indigenous, and with that came like pride and shame and conqueror and conquered, and you know, like feeling like that's in me, and it's now I'm like, that's what I'm seeing in the mirror now. You know, so I'm using scrap metal to make these really refined colonial shapes. Not all the time, some of them look like this. There's always a not all the time. Some things always go off somewhere else. So there's a fair amount of like shame in my work I've realized a lot lately. And I think it comes out in these spilled things, you know? There's something really like you were kind of natural, like, oh, I made this spill, this mess, you know, I peed the floor or whatever, you know? So I didn't know any of that language when I was making these, and I'm glad I didn't, because they wouldn't probably work. You know, they'd look like somebody was trying to tell you that. So those crowns, I started making these crowns, and I set them on the shelf. I mean, they were there for years, and they kind of embodied this, you know, they're sort of like the crown of thorns in a way or something, you know, like, oh yeah, you want to be king? Yeah, here you go, you know. It was kind of like a crown a clown would have to wear, or something like that, you know, somebody else would put on you. And so I made these crowns, and it came down over my eyes, by the way, so they come down very low. Set them on the shelf. Working on this stuff. And then I started doing this. And this, yeah, I'd never worn them at all forever. And then I started wearing them. And I started realizing, like, all those things that I'm putting out, like, you know, these concepts of, like, colonialism, indigenous, dichotomies or dualities, and you know, pride and shame, and how I kind of think of that as like this ball that kind of rolls around. Like sometimes you're proud of this thing, and then later you're ashamed of that thing, and the other thing, you know, maybe you're proud of your colonial heritage, maybe you're proud of your indigenous heritage, maybe that flips back and forth, you know, rolls around. You know, things aren't like set and locked in, you know. And if they are, they get toppled over and break sometimes. So I came up with this character, or it came to me again, and the character's name is Cortizuma, and it's putting together of Cortez and Montezuma. And I thought, well, isn't that a kind of fitting physical metaphor to play, you know, to like move in the world with that. And I had all these ideas for what that character would do, and every time that character went and did something else, you know, it was like having some kind of animal on a leash that shouldn't be. So this is Cortizuma at its 500th birthday. This was 2019, actually, November 8th. And that is an important date. I found this out later, but so there's in Mexico City, downtown near the Zocalo, that's the main square. That's where Montezuma met Cortez. Cortez met Montezuma for the first time on November 8th, 1519. So that's my birthday, and that's my birthday. And so I was like, oh, of course, you know, it's all coming together. I'm making the connections, you know, connect the dots, do your research, you know. And so of course it just seemed, that's who I am. It's not I don't really have a choice in it too much. So then I started doing performance. I call them performances because we're doing art talk in a way, and it is performance, but performance is like, to me, it's like a term like abstract art, you know, it doesn't really work too well sometimes. So I'm, you know, this is pretty far away from where I started. I'm not too far from the shore, though. But in this piece, I was actually like, what's that? Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I made this surfboard for an exhibition at the Maritime Museum because I was thinking about like maritime vessels, things in the things on the water. I was thinking about sculpture, water, whatever. So I made a surfboard, and first I was going to make like some fantasy shape, like Cortizuma would have this like really crazy surfboard with all this stuff, and I'm like, no, I want to surf on this board. You know, I like to surf, so I was like, no, I'm gonna make like a real board. So I made a real board, and I paddled it out, And I swam back to shore, and this board was anchored off the coast, you know, in the water. So when you went to the exhibition, you could look out the window. You're directed to kind of look out the window at the sculpture over there, you know. So, so it sat there for like 3 months or something, except one time. And I had to get like clearance from the harbor master, and I had to make like a plan, and then it floated away. And I got this email with one of the park rangers, and he's holding the board like, "Is this yours?" I was like, "Yes." So anyhow, so you know, don't get stuck on one vehicle. You know, you might need a bike to get across town now, but you know, you might need a horse to get over the hill, and you might need a skateboard to get down the hill, and you might need a boat to get across the water. So like, be a little flexible, you know. So Cortizuma here is praying a rosary made out of balloons. So they're helium balloons, and I really like, you know, I like like kind of pathetic magic, you know. I like the magic. You can see it. You can see what's going on, and it's like super economical, you know. Like you want something to levitate, helium balloons. You know, and there's all these great stories of like crazy things that have happened where like this guy in Brazil was like trying to raise money for, he's a priest, he's trying to raise money for some chapel for truckers. And so he like gets all these helium balloons and he floats away and he never is seen again because he goes to heaven, right? He's just goes to heaven. So I was just so inspired by that. Like, I mean, I'm so grateful that I'm not that guy, but you know, all I have to do is like look stupid to the people standing around here. But, you know, so I went up there and I prayed the rosary on these balloons. I didn't let them go, although that would be great because it's so cool when you let balloons go, but it's not cool because of the birds and stuff. So, yeah. These are just photos, though. You know, here's another word I have trouble with is documentation. You know, like. I don't really want to call these documentation necessarily. I'll get into that in a bit, but documentation is about the meaning you make from what you record, not just the recording. You know, it's not just a security camera footage. That's not documentation, all right? Anyhow, so as Sean mentioned, we went to, we got invited into this show called The Possible at Berkeley Art Museum. It was their final show in their old building, this brutalist building, like crazy building. And no connection in there. Like, it was like so confounding, you know. But we set up all this stuff, and this was what, you'll see a little video, I'll show you. This was a little kind of like what some of the something did. We just put all this stuff out, and people like walked in there, and they're like, I can pick up this guitar, really? Okay. And they, you know, they do something, or saxophone, or like some, you know, broken kid's piano toy, you know, and it was just like all there, and people would come in and just like do stuff. And one of the things I was kind of bringing in was like costume stuff and prop things, you know. So I bring in like some of the things I used in my performances, like my disco ball on a stick, you know, and all this costume things and lots of glittery stuff. And they did all this wild stuff with like weird lights, and I don't know, you could get in the picture. It was there's too many cables everywhere too, so it's a little bit dangerous. You know, it's kind of good to have a little bit dangerous for people because they kind of go like, oh, this is real. You know, something a little bit like, I got to watch myself a little bit. All right, too much talking. Here's the video of a performance we did at the something. See if I can get this playing. It's 7 minutes long. Thank you for your indulgence in watching. Is there a volume level I could raise on that? that was one of the things we did. It's what happens when you don't have a plan, but you have an intention. And I say that because that wasn't a scripted thing that we were doing. That large thing, that was a giant mylar balloon. It was supposed to float, but it didn't because it's hard to make those seams work. But it was based on drawings of the shape of this mountain that we covered over called the something. And what you didn't just witness this ritual though, you saw what film could make of that action. I just want to be clear about that. We're trying to do a spiritual gesture toward a specific issue. In this case, the something being closed down at a specific place and time. Berkeley Art Museum happened to be Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday is about, rising up. This guy showed up with a bike helmet and kind of joined in. And he was kind of like, God in a weird way. And so those are the dots that I'm connecting when that happened. So this is sort of the meaning that I make from that event. So it's just an interpretation of that ritual that film can do. It's sort of a celebration or a rite, if you will. Celebration, when I use that word, I don't mean so much like birthday. I mean more like a priest is a celebrant of Mass. You celebrate, like a feast day, you celebrate in that sense. All right, so it's trying to tell the story. This is a problem that you have when you start doing performance work, is like, how do you document that? Do you make a gorgeous photograph? Do you pose for that gorgeous photograph? Or are you doing something that happens to be photographed? Or maybe you're doing something and it's not photographed. Here's a little image of us. This is a filmed thing, the next thing. It's very short. It's like 10, 15 seconds or something. Is this just a... It's like 10 seconds or something. So this is just a film as film. Like, it looks like performance, or maybe it is performance. It looks like, could it be some ritual thing? It looks like that. Yeah, maybe it is. But it's really just playing with film. I'm making that distinction. Yep, and he's still doing it. This is a performance I did at school. I like to think in terms of like visual metaphors and like physical metaphors. And so it was a lecture hall like this, but it was bigger, and it was the last day of art theory lecture, and like all the professors were there. And I'm gonna change the language. So all the priests were there, and the congregation was there, right? And it was a religious institution. And I was kind of looking at like, how does art school approximate religion? Is it like, if you sit quietly and like listen to the priest, and put your money in the basket, do you get salvation at the end? And what is that? Does that mean you get like the show at the greatest museum in the whole entire world? Or does it mean, what are you kind of doing here? And what am I doing here? Sort of pushing those issues. So I did this thing. I called it the offertory hymn, and I got up and I made this really awful song, because I don't make songs, and I sang this song, and it was really embarrassing. I was led up on stage, and then I had a couple friends go around, and they collected money, and we collected $8.64, which is connection here is like, my birthday is like November 8th, 1964. Bam, all those numbers are just like exploding perfectly. And this is actually a recreation of that I made in for a Viewmaster reel. Unfortunately, you can only see one of them, so you're not seeing it three-dimensionally. But when you look in these old Viewmaster reels, you see a three-dimensional picture. It's like a little tiny theater. But that's not really the documentation. It's like one little snippet, right? So I was like, well, how could I really document this differently? I went back to ex-votos, and I was like, well, was there some transformation that happened? Was there some miracle that happened or not? Or maybe it's like modern day miracle, which is like the anti-miracle, you know? And it was like, this was the anti-miracle, you know? So the story was way longer than anything that could have been filmed, because this happened afterwards outside. The story to me was, you know, like I collected all this money, and then like nobody said a word to me, and I went outside and I stood, and I even borrowed like collection plates from a church, and they were like, yeah, okay. And I stood outside looking at the pavement, and I told myself, I'm never going to do a performance at this school again. I was just like, oh, this is terrible. This is the most embarrassing thing ever. And so I took the money, and I decided like what I should do is open an account with the money, and that I figured I'd gain interest on the money, and I was like, I'm going to extend this even further, and I'm going to at the end of at graduation, maybe I'll distribute all this money. So I got checks for the account. And then the bank started calling me, and I didn't know that was a bank calling me, and it ended up like costing like $100 in fees because the account went overdrawn, and so I got them to reduce it to $60. I paid $60, and then so where this story ended, you know, it was like I wasn't sure if I was gonna actually distribute the money anymore or not. The $8.64. I mean, I'm already $60 in the hole. So, but I had these checks. So graduation, I distributed. Before graduation, I typed up a check for each person that was there, all like 90 students and like 6 teachers, and I gave them each a check for like whatever that was. I don't know. It was like 34 cents or less or something. But I could document that a little bit differently. So that's what I started doing. Watches mark time, but they're not time, because time doesn't follow like that. Time goes forwards and backwards, and sometimes it's really compressed. Other times, like nothing happens for a really long time, you know? So like, you know, recording devices have got us to think that everything is like this and it's marked evenly forever. And I just don't exactly believe that, you know, because if that's, because our lives are about moments, not time, you know? It's kind of a Hallmark saying, but it works. So it's people, you know, it's us. We make the meaning of an event, and sometimes it's not like what we want it to be, right? Like sometimes you do something and you think it's going to be this great transformative thing, and it's not. So don't like lie to yourself and say it was if it wasn't. Just cop to it, man. People definitely be with you more. I started making this is how I displayed it eventually. Those are the objects that I collected. I got notes in there too, different things. Here's another performance thing. This involved bricks that I was using as a sculpture, and thinking about ways that art versus craft. And, you know, a very crude saying I heard years ago was, you know, craft, you can P in, art you P on. So I was thinking about that in terms of how this sculpture might function of bricks. I collected all these bricks. Somebody had left them from an MFA program, so I'm big on using things that find their way to me, or find me, or I find them. And all right. This is another performance. I started realizing like performances could happen without a costume and without a camera at all. Like there doesn't have to be, like I could claim anything to be performance. And not that I would claim anything, but I can claim anything that truly is a performance to be a performance, you know? I was in this gallery in New York City on this school trip, and there was a stack of, I don't know if you know this artist, Felix Gonzalez Torres, and he has this, like these posters, and he puts them on the ground, and it's kind of like you know, you can take one, you know, they're free, and you know, you're like, oh wow, I can take a poster. Wow, this is so cool. And so I'm standing there, and this lady comes up, and she's like, how much are those posters? And I was like, $1? And she's like, oh, okay. I'd like one poster. And I was like, I'm thinking in my head, well, if they're free and they're here, and I can do something with them, am I also allowed to sell them? What if that were part of part of it, right? So I pick up one of the posters and I start rolling it up. And then this guard comes over and he starts rolling it up. And then she's like, no, let him do it. And I was like, and I roll it up and I like hand her the poster and she like hands me the $1. And I go away. And I was like, I walked outside and I was just like, oh my God, you know, what just happened? And like, you know, I get to, that was a performance. And there you go. So here's the weird part. When I went to paint it in an ex-voto, it ended up looking exactly like my mother. So it did to me. Would you say so too in the back there? Oh, she doesn't know. She agrees. Okay. So I ended up showing it with the poster as well, one of the posters. And it's also embarrassing in a way though, because like this is a poster of people killed by gun violence in the U.S. I mean, it's like a serious issue here, you know? And so sometimes when you're doing these performance things, you feel like, or at least for me, I feel like, oh man, I'm stepping on things. Maybe I shouldn't be stepping on this stuff, you know? And I feel embarrassed about that. But you know, we move through the world and we bump into things and we say sorry and we try not to hurt things intentionally, you know? But we also have to do our work. So, all right. So yeah, you should have that purity of spirit and intention in there too, not to just call anything. It's not about just being transgressive, right? That's tired. All right, so then I started doing this, and that's not me, but I kind of created this event to happen. And so like, well, how did I go from that to this? Well, I went from that to this because of the buttons. Did this just go off? It did, right? Oh, can you hear me or not? Yeah, we got it. You know, okay, so that happened because of the buttons, because I made these buttons, and I realized I could, starting to like play with the idea of like opening up performance, like what's performance and all that. So this is for Band 7 for exhibition at YBCA, and what I did was I realized that if I gave people a button that says this is a performance, that they could enter the show for free and be a part of the exhibition. And so people would come in, visitors, not everybody, but some people would come in, and all I would say was, what I'd appreciate though is when you're done doing your performance, which is being a visitor, not like, doing something transgressive and, problematic, whatever. But when you're done being your visitor performance, come back and into the front gallery and tell me what your performance is. And I made wall labels for them, because one thing that defines whether something is art or not is if it has a wall label. Like, if it has a wall label, man, it's art, because it has an accession number, has all this stuff. So I made these wall labels, and I put them on the gallery wall or windows. And a lot of people did performances, but it like challenged people too, because they're like, I'm performing now, right? So suddenly you like walk different, like, what's a performance walk? And then you're like, this is stupid, this is boring. I guess I'm just normal, So what's performance? Does it have to be this over-the-top thing, or is it just, something else? But like the most touching performance to me was there was a donation box, like a vitrine thing in the middle of the entry, and there's also bathrooms in the entryway, and people come in and just use the bathrooms. And this homeless guy in this big overcoat came in. He went and used the bathroom, and then he's walking out, and he saw the vitrine thing with the button. There was somebody left a button there, and he picked it up and he ran out with it, And I was like, oh my God, so there's a homeless guy running around San Francisco with an overcoat and a button that says, this is a performance. And I was like, oh man, that's really powerful to me. We don't think of people are they not able to do art too? All right. Here's another studio thing. What happened here was I was filming myself doing something with books, and I was alone at night when it was quiet in the studio in the CCA building, and then I did this thing for like 20 minutes, and I'm blind, right? I can't see what's going on, and I do all this stuff to the camera and everything, and I'm done. I'm exhausted. And I take off the crown, and it's dark. It's totally dark. The lights had gone off in the building, so for I don't know how long I'd just been doing some kind of performance in the dark, and of course the footage is just black, you know, and I was like, wow, how cool, you know, like things can be, like, does it have to be illuminated? Does it have to be seen? So I decided to do this performance called Double Portrait. And what happened was somebody had thrown away these beautiful like portrait-shaped stretchers, linen stretchers. And there are two of them. And, you know, they sort of just came to me, officer. And no, they were just kind of there. And so I picked them up, and I had them for a long time. I didn't know what I was going to do with them or not or whatever. And I was like, well, maybe I could, you know, I should paint some portraits on these. And I'm like, well, who should I paint? I'm like, Cortez and Montezuma, duh, you know. So I decided I'd paint Cortez and Montezuma, you know, paint kind of a self-portrait, like a dual self-portrait. And then I was like, well, but I should paint them on opposite walls at the same time, you know, because what would that do, you know? Because, you know, when we're painting things, like, lots of things are going through our head. It's not like we're just so focused and doing like we have these other voices and narratives and you know, whoever else we're thinking about, the audience, our teachers, or whatever, you know, all that's playing in there. So I have this curtain. I set up, you know, I had a bunch of my balloons. You can see these paintings here, and I started to I did this performance, and here's my shoes I wear, and here's the recreation of it on a ViewMaster slide. And then I was asked to do it at San Diego Museum of Art. And I was like, oh man, this is like telling the same joke again. This isn't gonna work, you know, like, tell us that one when we were sitting around and you said, and you're like, no, I can't do that. That's like, it's just not going to work, you know. So, and these are kind of like, they're kind of like, I couldn't do it over again. So what I was able to finally like reconcile was I decided, well, no, I would do it over again, but I would do it exactly over again on the same canvases, and that these canvases would become paintings that I would work on for the rest of my life. So every time I get to do a performance, this is a big one I do, is double portrait, and it's just, I get to work more on those paintings. And so now I wanted, you know, the idea of like, what if I extend a performance to like whatever the rest of my life is, instead of it being like, you know, like, here's 5 minutes of video, you know, here's the pop song that fits on the radio, you know. It's like, so these are never really finished. I hope to, when I finally pass away, maybe exhibit them. But in general, and always and for now, they live in these cases, these velvet covers. And part of that is that I want to present them but not show them, because I don't want my marks that I make when I'm painting Cortez and Montezuma to interrupt your idea that you have or don't have about who those characters are. You either have an idea or you don't have an idea, but I don't want it to be about you looking at me, my work, and going, oh, I don't know, that's not the right skin tone. And it's not about that. One of these is Cortez and one of them is Montezuma. They do get mixed up. I think they've been worked on in different ones. It says something was performed in like a gold thread containing a portrait. I kind of think of the way like the Torah. I'm not Jewish, and so forgive me if I have this wrong, but you know, it's like paraded into the community sometime, and it's like it's covered, you know. So I mean, do you really know that it's in there? Maybe it's not, maybe it's just like a big cartoon book or something. But like, it plays on your idea of like, what do you believe and what do you not believe? Or just the idea of believing someone. Do we believe recorded devices more than we believe people now? So, so then I started doing this. I'm a little lost on time, so you can see oh my gosh, I was supposed to end already, huh? Well, okay. You can see time is one of the things I work with. Anyhow, so I'm just going to show you really quickly. I've been making these codices. So these are multi-panel stories. In Mesoamerica, they have all these codices in there. They're cool because like they could be, they're not just a story, but imagine a story that you get to tell just based on the pictures. I mean, we have books like that for kids now, right? So it's like almost a mnemonic device. You look at the picture and it reminds you what the story is. I'm going to tell you this story really quick because it's pretty interesting. So I painted it because of Jose's email. There was a church in downtown Los Angeles. I left an ex-voto there. This is a picture of the ex-voto. And it was a quick handwritten one, but I was trying to be like, am I just an artist making ex-votos, or do I really kind of have something in this? And I was in this exhibition, and I was kind of concerned about how I'd be presented, and I kind of prayed about it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to leave an ex-voto in that church in downtown if this comes out. And it came out. And so on my way out of town, I stopped in the church and I made this little scrawl. And there's a wall with the Virgin of Juquila, which is a place in Mexico. And I left that there, all done, drove back to San Francisco. This kind of tells that story a little bit. Got a phone call about a show, made a promise to do the ex-voto. After the show, I remembered my promise. I made an ex-voto. Now, the ex-voto, it turns out, like a year goes by, and I get an email from somebody I'd never heard of. I don't know how he got my email. It turns out the ex-voto I left had like been found on the sidewalk somewhere in downtown Los Angeles by this lady. And the lady had given it to her brother because she said, this looks like some kind of work you would do. And I guess I had signed it, and he found my email. I don't even know I don't know. And he emailed me, and he's like, hey, I found this piece of paper. My sister gave it to me. Are you? And I was like, what? So I'm like, yeah, that's me. Oh my God, you found that? You found that? Like I threw that out in the world, and it came back. So this is a kind of visual representation of some of that. He emails me. I'm kind of looking through this door window thing. So that goes by. Another year or so later, I'm like helping a teacher at CCA do something, California College of the Arts, and and we're having lunch with students, and we're talking, and afterwards, one of the students comes up to me and he goes like, hey, you're not that guy that left the note on the church in whatever? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm the guy that emailed you. So he's a student now at CCA. And I was like, what? So I was like, yeah, exactly. So I was like, you need a graduate student advisor? And he's like, yeah. And so I became his graduate student advisor. So this is kind of this is a little, a how to become a graduate student advisor. And there we are. So, all right. I think we're done. I have should I show the last thing? No. All right, I'll show this last real thing real quick. Let me see, I'm going to probably, oh, that's it. Oh, yeah, here we go. Oh, where's the sound? Oh, there's the sound. This is like 4 minutes long. My grandmother was from Pipestone, Minnesota, my mother's side, and I found all these postcards and snapshots from Pipestone, Minnesota, so I was trying to do something with my heritage there, but I let it just do this because this seemed like a cool thing, and I backed away from it being really didactic and too heavy about, you know, some kind of historical thing. But I wonder if some of those images might have family in them that I don't recognize. Pipestone's a really small town, or was back then. This is that important moment when you're watching something of like kind of silly magic where it's a little tedious, you know, and you're just like, all right, all right. But it's, there you go. All right. Thank you very much for your attention today, and welcome back to the university. Oh.
It was like some kind of like blueprint or something, and the text said like de facto banker goes to
Oh, yeah.
Con and eats some organic things and bugs out.
Yeah.
So like the whole time I was thinking about like kind of cool ritual, and this started to feel a little psychedelic for me.
Yeah.
And kind of a little metaphysical and things like that. Was that like any thread, or was that just randomly what I gleaned?
Well, it wasn't part of the performance necessarily, but I was really interested in one of the things, I was at Berkeley Art Museum, I was thinking about the psychedelic revolution, and that, a lot of that started because of an article in Life magazine, and that's what that was taken from. And so what happened was this banker from New York went down to Mexico in search of these mushrooms that cause visions, and they did this like 10-page spread on his trip down to Mexico in Time magazine, and then Timothy Leary and all these other people saw the magazine, and then they decided to go down to Mexico. So it just happened to be also in there. I guess it is a little psychedelic, the whole performance. So.
I picked up online because it's really
Yeah,
like a lot of heavy metaphysics and transcendentalism and
yeah,
whole ritual. It's just a very nice whirlwind of all these kind of elements, and it really hit.
all right, yeah, thank you. Yes,
I just wanted to, this is the second time I heard you speak, and I
all right,
you spoke with Sean's class, so last
oh
time
yeah,
I
right,
really appreciate it.
yeah,
Just the spirit of play
yeah,
that's in your work is really, really refreshing and inspiring, I think. It's
Yeah.
never bogged down, you know?
yeah,
And it's great to see, it's great to be in an educational institution and to have this kind of thing. You know?
oh great, yeah,
Appreciate it.
thanks, yeah. Play's a little bit vulnerable as adults. Little kids will play, you know, they'll run around. But like as adults, when we enter that play space, it's a little bit vulnerable. So, but stuff happens there too, you know. Like you end up with things you wouldn't have thought of. But then that's what makes your own work kind of unique, because you have things that other people aren't using, you know. And it only makes sense because, you know, you have a story that it fits. You know, I wouldn't be painting about those things otherwise, you know. So that's the way I see it.
I'm curious, as you were talking about the transitions of your work to these different phases, which is
Yeah.
really interesting to hear about. As you told the story of it, it was sort of like, sounded like it happened on a dime, right? On the watches or the, this one thing that, or was
Yeah.
is that really for you how your work, how you transitioned into
Yeah.
different ways of working, or was it?
Yeah. Well, sometimes like looking back on it, it seems very spontaneous, but you know, at the time it may not. You know, but I was also trying to make sense of my own practice over the past years. It was really hard to do that, and I was trying to find like what precipitated that. And I thought, well, it would be interesting if I bring in, you know, something that really contrasts, you know, and like this went to that. And then kind of fill in the backstory a little bit. And that's a little bit of the reasoning for the title as well, Fabulation. It's sort of like in response to the question, like, how'd you get there, you know? How did this happen, you know?
Hindsight kind of story.
A little bit, yeah, hindsight storytelling a little bit, filling it back in, yeah. Yeah, all right, sure,
Just one more quick comment.
yeah, sure,
The timing of the saint that you cite was unusual. I was just reading an article by Jean Rancière today where he cites, and I never heard about this, Saint Veronica as the patron saint of photographers, and yet she is the lady who in the Passion of Jesus Christ who gives Christ a towel and his
Yeah.
image is on the face.
yeah, yeah,
Or his face is on the towel and
Yeah.
is venerated in the Catholic faith.
yeah, right.
And how, just to see that kind of music zip around,
Yeah.
it was really cool.
All right, yeah, huh. Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that, Veronica, and the image. Yeah, sure. Really interesting. It's a very valuable photograph if you ever find it online. Yeah. Well, there's also like the Saint Fabiola. There's like millions of paintings of this image of this woman, and they're all copies of each other. And there's just, you know, this artist did a show of them in New York, and there's like hundreds of these, and they're all this much of a woman with a red veil on, you know. And it's just interesting, like you create, you know, like how do you, like, I don't know, what's interesting about that? Something's very interesting about that to me. Like the multitude of images that are based on one image, you know, and it tries, and then then you start seeing the differences in them, and then it starts to look like an audition, you know, like a lineup of all the possible Fabiolas, and let's see which one we want. And this is a prettier one, but this one looks more honest, but this one looks something, and I don't know. That's an interesting area for me too. All right. Yeah.
You sold us one of the prints.
I don't think so.
You should sell
I should tell it.
that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would.
Maybe.
I mean, I would. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it's
yeah,
for.
yeah, yeah.
I thought about it.
Uh-huh.
I took 5.
Oh, yeah?
Instead of 1.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah.
There's
There?
a Virgo, not that one,
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, that one? Yeah, sure. I mean, there's this many of them.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, yeah, I could. I could do it in a seance. I could do it in a seance. Yeah. Sean's in.
I think I'll be manager. Under the table.
Under the table, yeah. Felix? All right. I'm going to be here for a few minutes if you guys want to chat. I don't want to keep anybody too long. Thank you so much for